So during this interview, let's talk about accurate documentation. Quite simply, don't prepare your notes after the fact or long after the fact. We spoke about earlier in this presentation about why we need to start the interview process early on, because again, we're only human and our minds tend to recall different things, and we associate events with places. And if we're not taking notes, I know for a fact, if I've done an hour interview, there's no ways I can go back and write all my notes and have them accurate. So I prepare my notes at the time that I'm doing the interview. And if you remember, what I also said is it creates delays. It creates spaces within that interview where a person can think about their answers before they give them to you as well. Now, there is a time where you don't want people to think about their answers, but that's a separate discussion completely. For the interview, which is what we're talking about right now, take your notes, because you are going to forget. And not only that, when it comes down to litigation, at the end of the day, lawyers will have a field day if you let them know that you interviewed someone and you wrote up your notes the day after, or later on that afternoon when you got back to your office, because then they can tear it to pieces about your memory recall. If you can't, and again, if you remember, we spoke about the initial interview, if someone is coming up to a supervisor as it happens and lets them know something's just occurred, you're not always able to take notes right away as they happen. Very simply, you might not have a notepad with you or a pen, okay? But you've got to do it within a very reasonable time. So for instance, let's say it does happen on the floor and the supervisor or even a security guard gets pulled aside and a complaint is made to that person, and he's not in a position right away to take those notes. He's got to do it within a reasonable amount of time. So he's got to show the court that he did it with a reasonable amount of time. So what he would say in this case is, yes, John came up to me on the floor. He'd mentioned this actually happened. I listened to him. Right away, the threat was still imminent. We had to call the police. We had to remove the person. We had to treat the injuries. And then I went back to my office and I wrote my notes. So the reasonableness is going to be the key factor when it comes down. So always, it's not reasonable to do it a week later. You've come to work, you've done things in the meantime, and now someone's asked you, hey, can you give us your version or notes of what happened a week ago? That's going to be determined as unreasonable. Not only unreasonable, but it's unreliable because it happened so long ago. What I'll typically do in an investigation when I've come in and I'm doing an interview and I've taken some notes, I will allow the witness or the person that I'm speaking to read my notes that I've taken. Let them take a look through it. I'll show it to them. They take it aside and they take a look through it. Why do I do that? Well, it allows them to initial the notes. I want them to read the notes. I want them to initial it. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that they agree with what I said or the notes that I took. They might recant something that they've told me, and all of a sudden they see it on the paper and see the gravity of what they've said and say, well, okay, no, I didn't say that, so can we take that out? I won't do that. What I'll do is I'll make a note that they don't agree with the sentence. I'll say, this is what they told me. When they read the notes, and this comes at the end of it, they don't agree with paragraph 4, line 3. Okay? So, again, it still gives them the opportunity to initial those notes. So when it goes to court or it goes to an arbitration and the notes come out, they can't sit there and say, well, I never saw those notes, I never said that. By letting them read the notes and make an initial, it goes a long way to an arbitrator or any kind of process after the fact that, hey, you had the opportunity to read the notes and you didn't, at the time, dispute them. Or if you did dispute them, this is how you disputed it. And again, that will be for the process to sort out after the fact of why he changed his mind at the end.